This week on The Breakout,
we're talking NGAD
and what it means for the military and Boeing. Welcome to The Breakout. I'm Mehta.
I'm Valerie Insinna.
Val, we are gathered here today to talk about, well, this guy. That's NGAD. That's the F-47. This is a program that we've been talking about for a decade. Seemed like there were points where it might not actually ever get awarded, but not only is it here, we had a very unusual rollout.
Yes, the announcement actually came from President Donald Trump at the White House, flanked by Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and, the Air Force Chief of Staff, General Alvin. I don't think anyone, a couple months ago had anticipated that this decision would go quite so high, but a couple weeks ago we started hearing that there had been briefings to the White House and, maybe Trump himself would make the final call on whether to go ahead with NGAD. So, I don't think you really see this that often in defense acquisition.
No, it's pretty unusual. And look, this is the biggest aviation contract since B-21, which is somehow a decade ago at this point. Obviously, Trump announcing Boeing won over Lockheed Martin in the Oval Office is kind of unusual. Let's just hear what he had to say.
It's something the likes of which nobody has seen before in terms of all of the attributes of a fighter jet. There's never been anything even close to it, from speed to maneuverability to what it can have to payload.
With the obvious caveat that we don't know actually that much about it because it's a classified program and they're obviously keeping parameters under wraps. We've learned a little bit from Trump's comments, from Alvin's comments after the fact about what this program is going to kind of look like.
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing that we learned is that there could potentially be international sales. I don't think anyone had thought that previously. I think people had anticipated that this would go down the road of F-22 where it was a US-only product.
Yeah.
But you heard Donald Trump say that, we could potentially sell this to some very close allies, maybe a toned-down version, 10% or so, because they might not be our allies forever.
Classic Trump, yeah.
Yeah, so I think that was the biggest thing we learned. I think in terms of the overall parameters of the jet, it's sort of what we already understand, that this was going to be developed to fight alongside drones or collaborative combat aircraft, that this was going to be stealthy, that this was going to be, put a high priority on being able to do long-range missions. So not a ton of surprises, which is not altogether surprising for a classified program.
All right, so obviously this is big for the Air Force, but it's maybe even bigger for Boeing, which now has a fighter locked in for the future in a way that it sure didn't have just a couple of days ago.
Yeah, just kind of running this back a little bit. Boeing is kind of slowing down its Super Hornet line. That's going to phase out in the next couple of years. It's still got F-15EX, but I think there's a big question mark there in terms of how long that goes. So, Boeing really needed to win either NGAD or the Navy equivalent, the FAXX program, in order to assure its future in St. Louis. I mean, there are a bunch of other programs going on there as well, but its history in that area has always been all about fighter jets.
Yeah.
And without one of these programs, I think you have a large question mark about, does Boeing continue doing combat aircraft into the future?
Well, and Boeing defense generally, because we all know there's been major issues with Boeing's commercial arm. This has been a very public issue. We know there have been issues with the KC-46. We know there's been issues with T-7. These are Boeing's main programs. And there was a real conversation out there over the last 6 or 8 months of, does CEO Kelly Ortberg, who's come in kind of charged with remaking Boeing, does he just say, let's sell the defense arm?
Yeah, I think, if Boeing had not won, this would be a completely different conversation. Ortberg right now is trying to figure out what is Boeing's core business. I mean, I think, obviously having a flagship fighter is core business to Boeing.
Yeah.
I think maybe without that, the future of its defense business becomes a little bit more of an open question. Do you decide to sell off larger chunks of that? Maybe so this could provide maybe some stability. Boeing has sunk a ton of money into its St. Louis sites to try to shore it up, to try to gather talent. So, this is really great news for that company. And I think it was surprising news. I don't really think that a lot of Wall Street saw Boeing beating Lockheed, given that Lockheed, won both fifth-generation fighter programs.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, that there was a big expectation Lockheed would still end up holding on to this. And Wall Street, give Val credit, she's been telling everyone for months that Boeing is going to win. Boeing made a big bet investing internally. Now they've won. Now
they just got to execute.
Yeah, now comes the hard part, right? And we've certainly seen some execution problems with some Boeing defense things in the past. You got to imagine this is now a top A-level priority for Ortberg and his team going forward.
Yeah, I mean, now they just have to prove to the world that they can actually do this.
Yeah. All right. When we come back from the break, we're going to talk about some other things going on in the world of defense.
At Leonardo DRS, our agility helps bring the ability to dominate in any scenario, on any platform, helping our warfighters accomplish the mission and get home safely. Leonardo DRS, our agility, your advantage.
All right, well, NGAD's not the only news going on. We also have two conferences going on this week. First is in Huntsville, that's AUSA Global Force. We have Ash Roki, our Army reporter there. And in presumably a more scenic setting, we have Avalon Air Show going on, one of the biggest air shows in the Pacific. We have both Colin Clark and Michael Amaro there running around as well. One of the big themes that we're looking for is U.S. presence. We've seen over the last couple of weeks, under guidance from Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth and the administration, to kind of pare back attendance at big conferences. We're going to be watching to see if that happens. Otherwise, we'll see what the news is. There's certainly going to be a lot happening. And the best way to find out about that is to stay at breakingdefense.com. And make sure you're also liking and subscribing so you can get the weekly breakout delivered directly to you. I'm Aaron Mehta. Thanks for watching.